On April 3, 2026, an American F-15E Strike Eagle, call sign Dude 44, took a shoulder-fired missile over the Zagros Mountains in southwestern Iran. The crew ejected. The pilot came down in one spot. The weapons systems officer, a colonel, came down several miles away, bleeding badly, ankle likely broken, landing hard enough that his face was cut open. He had a pistol, an encrypted radio, his SERE training, and hundreds of Revolutionary Guard troops about to start hunting him. What happened over the next 48 hours would become one of the most complex combat rescues in American military history. It would involve SEAL Team 6, a CIA deception campaign, an improvised airstrip carved out of Iranian dirt, MQ-9 Reapers executing precision strikes on anyone who got too close, and eventually, after 2 transport planes got stuck in the mud and had to be blown up by their own crews, a firefight with local militias while a Little Bird helicopter lifted one injured American off a mountainside. But for the first several hours, nobody in Washington knew if the colonel was alive, captured, or sending signals under duress. His first radio transmission was 3 words: God is good. The problem with God is good is context. In any other situation, a wounded American announcing his faith over an encrypted frequency would have been reassuring. But the IRGC knows how American rescue beacons work. They'd captured American equipment before, and the phrasing, "power be to God," as Trump later misremembered it, sounded, to some intelligence analysts, like something an Iranian would say. Here, there was immediate concern that the colonel had been taken, that his captors had his radio, that the whole thing was a trap designed to lure more Americans into Iranian airspace. CIA Director John Ratcliffe would later describe the problem as hunting for a single grain of sand in the middle of a desert. But it was worse than that. They might be hunting for a trap disguised as a grain of sand. They ran the voice analysis, pulled his service record, talked to people who knew him. Turns out he's religious. God is good tracked with who he was. The decision came down from Trump: proceed with the rescue. Let's go back to the beginning. April 3rd, Friday morning, local time. Good Friday, as it happens. The F-15E was flying low over southern Iran, using terrain-following radar to stay below the detection threshold of Iran's air defense networks. The mission was deep strike, bunker busters on hardened targets. The crew had done this before. The U.S. had been bombing Iran for 5 weeks by this point, and Trump had publicly claimed American aircraft could operate over Iran without them being able to do a thing about it. That claim aged poorly around 7 a.m. local time. The aircraft took a hit. Some reports said it was Iran's new advanced air defense system. Others pointed to a shoulder-fired missile, a heat seeker, probably Russian-made, maybe a 9K333 Verba. Either way, hydraulic failure, loss of control, both crew members punching out. The pilot, Dude 44 Alpha, came down in Khuzestan province. Relatively flat, relatively accessible. Within hours, Yotu HH-60W. Jolly green helicopters were in Iranian airspace. One of them took ground fire. Several crew members were wounded, but they got the pilot out. The weapons systems officer, Dude 44 Bravo, wasn't so lucky. He landed several miles from the pilot. Mountain terrain, the Zagros range, steep, rugged, the kind of place where local Bakhtiari nomads know every canyon and Americans know nothing. The colonel was hurt, bleeding from the face, ankle damaged. He activated his rescue beacon, then shut it off almost immediately. Too risky. The IRGC had equipment to track emergency signals. Instead, he started moving. SERE training. Get away from the crash site, find high ground, wait for friendlies. He hiked 20 kilometers, climbed a 7,000-foot ridge, found a crevice in the rock, invisible from above, sheltered from the wind. They're impossible to see unless you were standing right on top of it. He settled in to wait. Meanwhile, Iran went full mobilization. State TV announced a $60,000 bounty for information leading to his capture. The IRGC cordoned off the province. Local militias joined the search, and on Iranian state media, an anchor urged residents to hand over any enemy pilot they found. The colonel sat in his crevice, pistol in hand, face bleeding, listening to the sound of search parties moving through the mountains below. Here's where the CIA comes in. While the colonel was evading, Langley was running a parallel operation. Not to find him, but to make sure the Iranians couldn't. They planted a story. Through whatever sources they have inside Iran, and clearly they have some, they spread word that both crew members had already been recovered. That American forces were moving a valuable package overland, trying to exfiltrate via a maritime route. The Iranians bit, search teams shifted, resources moved toward the coast, and in the mountains of Kogiluya and Boyer Ahmad province, the hunt for the colonel temporarily cooled. This is what Ratcliffe meant when he later said the CIA executed a deception campaign to confuse the Iranians who were desperately hunting for our airmen. It wasn't just misdirection, it was active manipulation of Iranian command structures through planted intelligence. Some analysts have noted the sophistication required to pull this off. You don't leak a fake rescue story into IRGC channels without serious penetration of their communications infrastructure. Whatever assets the CIA burned on this operation, they burned them knowingly. By Saturday morning, the CIA had confirmation. The colonel was alive. They'd located his beacon signal, verified it wasn't a trap, and pinpointed his position in a mountain crevice roughly 5 miles northwest of an abandoned airstrip in southern Isfahan province. Now came the hard part. The rescue force that launched on the night of April 4th was enormous. 155 aircraft, according to Trump's later count. 4 bombers, 64 fighters, 48 refueling tankers, 13 rescue aircraft, hundreds of special operations personnel. The ground element included Air Force Special Tactics teams and, the detail everyone focused on, Navy Special Warfare operators from DevGru. SEAL Team 6, the same unit that killed Osama bin Laden. They flew 2 MC-13 OJ Commando 2 transport planes into Iranian airspace. So these are the workhorse aircraft of Air Force Special Operations Command. Big, lumbering, designed to land on unprepared strips in hostile territory. They touched down at an improvised airfield near the town of Mahyar. A FARP, Forward Arming and Refueling Point, was rapidly established. The C-13Os had carried, or were accompanied by, 4 MH-6 Little Bird helicopters. Small, agile, the kind of thing that can land on a mountaintop. One Little Bird lifted off toward the colonel's position. Here's where accounts diverge slightly. Some reports describe a heavy firefight with Iranian forces during the extraction. Others say U.S. commandos fired weapons to keep Iranian forces away, but didn't engage in sustained combat. What's consistent? Iranian forces were close, closing in. Iran MQ-9 Reaper drones overhead were dropping ordnance on anyone who got within 3 kilometers of the colonel's position. "They've been schwacking dudes chasing him," one source told the New York Post. The Little Bird reached the ridge. The colonel was extracted. He was alive, wounded, but mobile enough to be lifted out. Then the problem started. Back at the improvised airstrip, something had gone wrong. The nose gear of both C-13Os had become stuck in the soft desert soil. They weren't going anywhere. This is, in a sense, the nightmare scenario for any special operations planner. You've got your man, you've got your aircraft, and you can't leave. Iranian forces were advancing on the position. The colonel was aboard a helicopter that couldn't fly all the way out of Iran without refueling. And the planes that were supposed to carry everyone home were embedded in the dirt. The call went up the chain. The decision came back: destroy the aircraft. U.S. forces rigged charges on both C-13Os. They did the same to the 4 Little Birds that couldn't be flown out, and then they blew them up. The same way SEAL Team 6 blew up their stealth helicopter after the bin Laden raid when it hard-landed in Abbottabad. 3 replacement aircraft were scrambled. The colonel and his rescuers flew out under fighter cover, through airspace that American aircraft had been bombing for 5 weeks, with Iranian forces still converging on the now-burning airstrip behind them. Total time inside Iran, roughly 7 hours for the first rescue. Roughly 7 hours again for the second. Total American casualties, 0 killed, some wounded. Every American went home. Iran, unsurprisingly, tells a different story. Khatam al-Anbiya spokesman Ibrahim Zolfagari said the American rescue operation was completely foiled. He described it as a deception and escape mission that collapsed before it could begin. Iranian state media released video of what they claimed were destroyed American helicopters and transport planes. The U.S. didn't dispute that the aircraft were destroyed. They just clarified that Americans blew them up, not Iranians. There's a stranger wrinkle, though. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson suggested the whole thing might have been a cover story. that the claimed rescue was actually a commando raid aimed at stealing enriched uranium from Iranian nuclear facilities. He pointed out that the supposed crash site was a long way from Isfahan, east where the abandoned airstrip was located. Was this paranoia? Propaganda? Or does Iran know something we don't? Hard to say. The U.S. had, in fact, been publicly considering a special forces raid on Isfahan's nuclear complex. News reports about that plan surfaced on April 1st, just 2 days before the F-15 went down. What we're left with is this: an American colonel ejected over hostile territory, injured, alone, armed with a pistol. The U.S. military launched one of the largest and most complex rescue operations in its history, bigger than anything since Operation Eagle Claw, the disastrous 1980 attempt to rescue hostages from Tehran that killed 8 American service members and led directly to the creation of SOCOM. The CIA ran a deception campaign sophisticated enough to redirect IRGC search teams. SEAL Team 6 landed 200 miles inside Iranian airspace, extracted the colonel under fire, and got out, losing aircraft but no personnel. And at the center of it, a wounded man on a mountaintop bleeding from the face, who radioed 3 words that almost aborted the whole thing because they sounded too much like something his captors might say. God is good. The colonel's identity hasn't been released. Trump called him a highly respected colonel. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said he's recovering from his injuries. The operation cost an estimated $300 million, mostly because of the aircraft that had to be destroyed. That's a lot of money, but it's also, by any measure, a successful combat rescue from deep inside enemy territory during an active war, something the United States hasn't pulled off since, well, ever, if you're talking about Iran specifically. Jimmy Carter's helicopters burned in the desert in 1980. This time, the Americans did the burning themselves, on their own terms, with their people already out. 46 years later, same mountains, same enemy, different result. There's a detail I keep coming back to. The colonel hiked 20 kilometers on a broken ankle, climbed 7,000 feet, hid in a rock crevice for more than a day while Iranian forces with a $60,000 bounty on his head searched the mountains below. And the first thing he said, when he finally got a signal out? Not his position, not a request for extraction, not tactical information. 3 words of faith broadcast into the dark, hoping someone was listening.